This film, made by Mr. Terry Milton, leads us through some of the history of Wellington to focus on the park. As the park was given to the town by Fox Brothers, events leading up to this are traced. During the film, we ask 5 questions for you to think about. This glorious monument was erected in honour of the first Duke of Wellington, who is well known for military campaigns in India and then for guerrilla warfare in Spain against Napoleon's forces there, and especially for the Battle of Waterloo. The foundation stone was laid on the 20th of October 1817, when 10,000 people sang the national anthem at the monument. Most of them walked up there. After 1 year, the monument was 47 feet high. In the 1820s, it reached 121 feet. In 1846, it was struck by lightning. By this time, the mortar holding the monument up had been dissolved by rain. The viewing chamber at the top was added in 1853. It reached its present height of 175 feet in 1892, 75 years after the start. Perhaps the next person to win the national lottery would like to bring it up to 200 feet for us. In 1934, it was taken over by the National Trust. The base of the monument is square, and it was designed to house a Welshman, a Scotsman, and an Irishman who were supposed to cooperate in looking after the monument. The rest of the spire is triangular in shape. Our first question is, why was it not built square as other buildings are? The answer is quite simple, really. We are now moving across, and you can see the worsted spinning building and the factory chimney of Tone, of Fox Brothers, now going out of the picture. And in the upper part of the picture now you can see some greenhouses, and we would like you to think about where they belong. Terry is trying to find some chicken litter power stations down there now, but there aren't many of them about yet. There are plenty of chickens, though, and there are 129,974 cows in Somerset. We are now swinging round again for another view of the Fox Brothers buildings, which you can now see in the centre of the picture, and go on a bit further to the site of where the Elworthy wool empire used to be at Westford. This gun was not at Waterloo. The original guns, weighing 42 tons in all, were landed on Exeter Quay in June 1818. There was no money to pay the quay dues. Finally, in 1910, 4 cannon were transported from Exeter and placed round the monument. These were requisitioned in the last war for scrap metal. The town hall was opened in 1832, replacing an island building in the middle of the road. On the first floor, there used to be entertainments and lectures, and later a cinema. There were also many public meetings, including appearances by Emily Pankhurst, who spoke about women's votes, and Clement Attlee, the post-war Labour Prime Minister. The first post office was here in 1711, but this building was then the White Hart Inn. The post office moved round the town and came back here again in 1911. During this part of the film, we see several pictures of the beautiful results of the effort of the Wellington in Bloom Committee, and we pay a special tribute to the late Anne Squire. We now steer round again and have another look at High Street, and we would like you to wonder, if you know, why it is so wide at this point opposite the post office. In the 18th century, up South Street on the left, opposite where the school is now, was the warehouse of Weir Brothers. This was the centre of a cottage industry. Workers took wool home, washed it, dyed it, spun it and wove it, and brought it back. But by 1790, the whole process had been mechanised in Yorkshire, where they had coal to make steam to drive machinery. Thus was the modern factory born. These factories produced uniform high-quality cloth, and much cheaper cloth, in large quantities. We could not get coal here, because there were no railways yet, and bankruptcy threatened. For 5 years, Thomas experimented in South Street, trying to get horses to drive machinery. It didn't work. So he moved the whole operation to Tonedale, where he tapped the Westford stream 3/4 of a mile up and used water power instead of coal and steam to drive the machinery. Competition with Yorkshire was now possible. Fox had its own bank in 1844, which became Fox Fowler & Co. in 1879. Fox Fowler was the last private bank in the country to issue its own notes. We have some more Wellington in bloom flowers on the front of the building as it is today. We are now inside Lloyd's Bank. It may have celebrated its takeover of Fox Fowler with this music of the period. We are now inside the Wellington Museum. This is an enlarged cheque of the 1920s. These £5 notes were among the last to be printed by Fox Fowler just before amalgamation. They are dated 1921. The puttees now coming into the picture on the right were developed at Tonedale, and during the First World War, 70,000 were made per week. The bobbin in the centre is no longer in use, because spinning is no longer done in Wellington. If you take an ordinary shank of wool and pull, it comes apart easily. If, however, you twist it as you pull it, it slowly gets stronger and harder. Twist and pull a little, and you get soft knitting wool. Go on for longer, and you get harder, thinner thread for cloth. You see the name Tom's there. Where Shaw Bakery is now, to the right of the King's Arms, as we saw earlier, is where John Toms had a stained glass and organ factory. His son took over the business and was choirmaster at the parish church for 56 years during Queen Victoria's reign. The grandson was the famous violin string maker, and one of these violins is on show in the museum, unfortunately just out of sight, to the left of this picture. The best cloth is made from very fine wool, and we would like you to guess why the best wool is obtained from Australia or perhaps from South Africa. We are now in Tonedale Mill's weaving shed. This shows yarn or thread as bought from Huddersfield or Italy. Here we see Nigel preparing the long threads, which are wound to length onto large rollers. Complicated patterns with different colours can be used, and each thread has to be fed into the correct place. Here we see what a large number of threads are needed to cover the whole width of the cloth. The arm that you saw just now tensions the threads, pulling them apart so that they do not bunch when Nigel cuts them to length. Weaving is the process of forming a cloth by the intersection of threads at right angles, those passing from end to end forming the warp, and those crossing forming the weft. The threads have to be of the right length, strength, and tension. Here we see Cathy drawing the threads through eyelets called ebbles. These eyelets move up and down in the loom, and for each movement, the shuttle is fired across, carrying its own cross thread. The pieces of metal you see here, called fallers, cause an electrical alarm if a thread breaks during weaving, causing the loom to stop immediately, automatically. If this did not happen, enormous mending problems would follow. Weaving can now begin. This picture shows some of the machinery controlling the shuttle. There is an old shuttle as used on the old looms, and in front of it, that small white object is one of the modern shuttles, which fire across something like 5 times per second. Here we see the cross threads being forced back against the cloth by that moving arm. The words "all wool made in England" used to be sewn in on the side of the cloth after weaving. However, certain Far Eastern manufacturers, respecting our cloth, found it rather easy to do the same with their own cloth. To stop this cheating, the words are now woven in by methods too complicated for the Far East. Here is the perforated plastic which controls the weaving of the words and the extra machinery to drive that weaving. We hope you enjoyed the noise of the machinery. Here are Denise, Hazel, Pat and Vron, the mending ladies, enjoying themselves. Mending can be necessary for several reasons. One, which doesn't happen often, is when coloured thread is in the wrong position. It has to be changed by hand along its whole length. After mending, there are about 5 more finishing processes. These ladies like 60s music, and so here is a little bit. The first operation with the yarn is to wind it off the spools they came on onto cones of suitable size, and at the same time the tensions in the threads are controlled by these machines that Cindy is using. The yellow knobs that you see there are used to control the tension as the yarn is wound, and it runs at quite a high speed, which you can't see very clearly in these pictures. Cheryl is explaining here how it works. This tensioning is used on both the warp and the weft threads. We are now in the pattern room, which used to be run by Jeff Salter for many years. There are believed to be 1 million patterns stacked away in here, every one of which can be recreated at any time and woven up in small quantities for customers' samples. This is done on some of the old small looms which have been kept in the weaving shed. For exhibitions, only a few square inches of pattern are needed. Square feet are needed for trial lengths. Many of the samples are kept in these books, which hold what are called temptations. These books date from early in the century. The managing director, Mr. Jack Hudson, goes to America and elsewhere to seek out customers. The computer you saw just now is part of the modern system that he has had installed, which keeps track of every piece of cloth in its progress through each step of the manufacture. In this way, he knows where what is and when, and whether it is on schedule. Late deliveries are very unpopular with customers. In this and in many other ways, Mr. Hudson has made many important contributions to the running of the firm. Here are some of the labels that are sewn into finished garments. We have many varieties of them. Here is Mr. Jack Hine, who was company secretary for a long time and worked for the firm since the war. And here is Mr. Michael Fox, the chairman, who is as often as not seen in a boiler suit, repairing the sort of machinery you see here. This view from the top of the wool rooms towards the monument and the railway shows the large pond at the bottom end of the water supply system between the basins and the factory. The mill stream now goes under the wool rooms. It fed a water wheel under the centre of the building here, behind the green bush, the water falling 20 feet. This wheel drove machinery in this building until 1845, when the coming of the railway meant coal and engines and iron dukes and steam, and heralded a big expansion of the factory. We are now in the boardroom. This clock is famous for showing the time of high tide at Topsham, the port near Exeter. It was very necessary to know when the cloth had to catch the boat, until the railways put Topsham out of business in the middle of the last century. This nameplate Iron Duke reminds us of an enormous steam engine that drove huge lumps of metal up and down in a terrifying manner. Eventually, some of this energy was transferred to an enormous wheel, which drove thick cables. More recently, this was used to generate electricity. We are now enjoying the basins. This view is of the overflow just above the two basins, which were used as a reservoir. These released water gradually, whenever the stream flow was not great enough to drive the wheel. The Basins Preservation Committee repaired this overflow several years ago and has done a splendid job in the whole basins area. More recently, Taunton Deane Borough Council has also made a big contribution. We are now looking at the basins themselves, and perhaps we can enjoy the tranquility of them to some more music. We're now going into the park, which Fox Brothers gave to the town in 1903 on an occasion of great national celebration. So our last question is, what was this great national event in 1903? A hint, this kind of event happens periodically, but it has not occurred recently. The park has had no structural change since its opening, except the addition of the War Memorial here in 1921. The present magnificent display of flowers is due to the work of Vic Verrier and his small band of helpers, who grow all the plants in greenhouses behind Vivery Park in Taunton, and who do all the watering of all the hanging baskets, etc. The park has never looked better, and we congratulate them on their efforts. The standard of the park was very important in the award of the second prize to Wellington in the recent competition, and the judge from Torquay said that this park is better than his own at Torquay. We thank Gillian Allen, Hubert Fox, Bob Spurway, Christopher Fox, and many people in the Fox Brothers weaving shed and mending rooms for information, and for the cooperation of Fox Brothers Management, Lloyds Bank, and Wellington Museum. Now we come to the questions which we asked you, and here are the answers. The monument was built triangular because it was cheaper. The greenhouses belonged to Basil and Sheila Masters at New Barn Nurseries. The High Street is wide because Wellington used to be a market town. The best wool comes from Australia or South Africa because of the climate there, which is very warm, and you get much softer wool from Australia than you do from sheep that live on the top of Exmoor. Now you can probably just see the words Edward VII, and the occasion for national celebration was the coronation of Edward VII in 1903, which was 1 year after Victoria died after her very long reign in the last century. Fittingly, we finish with a picture of the park cottage and the drinking fountain,